Hi, Jack Griffin here, a results leader.
You're listening to ResultsLeader.fm. Being a thought leader is easy. Getting results is hard. This show is for the results leader who lives and dies by their results. Here is your host and Chief Results Leader, Jonathan Rivera.
You are listening to ResultsLeader.fm. Welcome back to another edition. So stoked for you because today's interview is very, very different than any of the other ones we've ever done. And I really enjoyed my talk with Mr. Jack Griffin. He is the founder of Light Up Ventures, and he is an executive coach. By the way, Light Up Ventures, LUV, love. And you are going to feel the love in this interview, I promise. Let's jump in. Jack, welcome to the show. Are you ready to get started?
I'm ready, sir. Let's do it.
All right. What book or books have you given most as a gift?
Great question. One behind me is Nonviolent Communication by Dr. Marshall Rosenberg. Fascinating research around his approach to communications, particularly conversations. He's mediated some of the most heightened and intense battles out in the Middle East, also helping parents and children as well as business negotiations. So Nonviolent Communications by Dr. Marshall Rosenberg. Fascinating read, super practical, and highly recommended.
How did you come across that book?
I came through my coaching certification course, New Ventures West, year-long program, and it was one of the required reading options. So naturally, I gravitate towards the communication space, caught my eye, and really, made some big differences in my own life as well.
What kind of differences? Like, what was your big takeaway from the book?
Big takeaway is observation-based feedback. Oftentimes in the workplace, especially in corporate settings, critical feedback can be a difficult challenge for managers and leaders. And often it's feelings-based, it's selfish. And so this particular approach focuses on observation-based communication to communicate a way forward, whatever the situation may be, positive or negative. It at least brings a certain framework that Dr. Rosenberg applies. And really for me, whether it's, with my wife and friends or my clients, really bringing some of that observation-based communication is crucial.
Share with us a story of how an apparent failure set you up for later success.
Wonderful. Yeah, great question. So a couple examples come to mind, plenty of failures in the bag over the years. I would say one in particular was at a previous employer when I was still in the corporate world before going out on my own, working with an executive, a little bit higher maintenance, wonderful leader, and really, driving a lot for the company, but also had high expectations. And so when I was coaching her on one of her keynotes, there was just a miscommunication. And while, maybe it could have been shared with the team, I owned up to it because, at the end of the day, with me leading that situation, it was on me. And so a little bit of a failure in ultimately how she was able to step up in the way we told her story. But then really, it was such an important reminder with when you're working with higher level folks, especially at the top C-suite level, that attention to detail, setting expectations, and really providing a balance of practical guidance in the coaching work we do, but also making sure to ask the right questions. And I think that's one of the biggest misses in this space is people not asking enough questions. And a big failure of mine was not doing that at the time, but I now ask plenty of questions.
Now, how do you know if you're asking enough questions? Because this topic comes up all the time for me and my team. I think they never ask enough questions unless they're asking me questions. And then I think it's too many. But for our clients, I certainly think we could use more questions. So how do you balance that out? How do you know you're asking enough questions?
That's a great question, Jonathan. So I think for me, it's very situational. For example, when I'm doing some one-on-one executive coaching, I try to take a more Socratic approach. So Socratic method of asking questions to allow the client to come up with potential solutions to whatever issues they're working on themselves, because that brings an inherent deeper connection with that way forward that they came up with on their own by me simply asking some questions. Now I've gotten to situations where I'm asking questions and they're stumbling or there's a roadblock and they're not seeing a way forward. That's when I switch my methodology to modeling. And that's when I would then model a particular approach, maybe on how they're going to navigate a conversation with their organization. If we weren't able to draw it out naturally with some of my questions, and there's clearly a difficult hurdle for them to get over, Socratic's no longer going to work. So let's switch over to me modeling a bit and then workshop, iterate, and still make sure that it lands well with them. So for me, one indicator is if there's not really any progress being made forward with the amount of questions. Another thing is I usually ask questions until I get to my last question, which is always anything else. Very simple question, whether it's my team internally or with clients. Is there anything else? Any way that we can appease you more? Any other questions you have for your personal development, this leadership topic? And if they say no, great. That's usually a good indicator.
What would you say is the most worthwhile investment you have ever made?
100% is in delegating what I'm not good at. And when I say that specifically, I mean hiring the right people who are a lot better at what they do than what I think I might try to do, because I have a tendency to bring my OCD perfectionism into everything, especially running my business. And so by bringing on, for example, an admin, Erica, who's been with me for a long time, bless her heart, because she deals with me on a regular basis, but she also keeps us organized from invoicing to scheduling, as well as things like a bookkeeper, an accountant, or a variety of marketers that I've brought onto the team over the years. Whereas maybe I could spend some time on my own to figure some of these things out. At the end of the day, there's people who are much better than I am. And at the end of the day, also, it's not so much about the result for me as it is about the relationship. I'd much rather bring on a team of people, surround myself with diverse perspectives, diverse skills that really then we can all complement each other well for that end game.
How did you figure that out? I mean, is that something you got into business knowing that you had to find the people to strengthen you up, or is that something that you matured into?
I think that's a great way of thinking about it. I like the latter of the maturing into. And there's a balance too, right? Because I recognize maybe some listeners right now, they don't have the resources to bring on that level of delegation. And so oftentimes you have to wear many different hats as an entrepreneur. And so I think early on in my corporate experience, I realized the benefit of bringing people on for the situation I was leading at the time, and then knowing it was going to be important for the level of work I wanted to be doing with the level of clientele I work with. There's just a certain level of expectations. And so for me, maturing into, as you said, that need for bringing others on to really support some of these bigger projects, when we're talking some 6-figure POs here, no way I'm going to be able to do it myself. And frankly, I would just mess it up too if I did. So that's why it's been a learning process. And also I think one last note on it is the idea of sometimes an adaptive or flexible team, which is beautiful in this gig economy with the Upworks and other different staffing agencies out there, where you don't have to commit to a W-2 full year salary with people these days. And frankly, now in our new norm, people don't necessarily want that either. So there's a level of flexibility when bringing people on to support you that you don't necessarily need to feel it's a major commitment, at least at the set. And then you can, adapt and grow from there as needed.
Man, that is so interesting. I had a conversation with someone who helps grow businesses on this very show, and he introduced me to the concept of a fractional CMO and a fractional COO, where you could get top tier talent, but just a little piece of their time. They come in once a quarter or once a month. So it is fascinating how the world is changing. So I want you to think back, Jack. In the last 5 years, what new belief, behavior, or habit has most improved your life?
Wonderful question. Requires a pause on my end because it also touches on an emotional level for me as well. I think a belief in that I'm taken care of by my loving Heavenly Father as a believer and follower of Jesus Christ. For me, a belief that came with my faith as you mentioned in our previous question, the maturing. For me, coming from a background of needing to control everything, some high anxiety at certain points, whether that's personal or professional. And so for me, this idea or concept of surrender has been critically powerful to my development personally, to me being a loving husband, a supportive father now, is this idea of surrender, because there's such a tendency to need to control. And when I can trust in my God to have everything perfectly taken care of because he is perfectly sovereign because of his son and what his son did on the cross for me, shed his blood for my sins, that love I cannot put into words. And so the one word I can use to describe your question is the power of surrender.
How'd you figure that out? Because I wasn't on this show. We talked about this on another show and the concepts of surrender. And it's a beautiful, beautiful concept. But how did you figure out that you had to let go and let God's grace guide you?
Lots and lots of practice, maybe is one word to put it. But at the same time, I think the way his grace works sometimes is he can allow us to come to our own end when we're trying to white knuckle everything, whether that's in business or life, and it's just not working and we're stumbling and we're frustrated and we're impatient, like myself, who can be very impatient with little things. That I think he allows us to that, as a good father does, to a point, right? And then, okay, you know what? Now it's time to take my hands off the reins, because frankly, I'm only causing others more pain, and the impatience has gotten to a point where there's got to be another way. And then that grace, as you mentioned, of the Lord is so beautiful and so sweet. And there's a little bit of fear that can come with letting go, right? Because our society, and especially Western cultures, push this idea of you can do it, individual, rah, and the pressure that can let go, the yoke, as Jesus explained, that lightens when we step onto his path instead of trying to force our own. It's beautiful, but it's also a lot of hard work, especially in the beginning. So to answer your question, I think it's getting to a point of realizing that we need some support and we need that love of God to help take us to that next level of trust.
Oh, man, that is beautiful. We don't talk enough about that on the show. Thank you for that. Now, let's get back to business. What are some bad recommendations you hear in your area of expertise?
I'm so glad you brought this up. I was actually last night on a class I'm taking through Stanford High Performance Leadership, and it's been wonderful. Instructors, a wealth of knowledge that they're bringing to the curriculum. And one point that I hear in these and in other circles, especially in the coaching, personal development space, and now in this COVID new dynamic, is everyone just says, be empathetic. Empathy. Look on LinkedIn newsfeed. Empathy, be empathetic. Our articles from HBR and everyone else in between is just be empathetic. But are people saying that to sound good, to sound like they're just these wonderful heroes for their teams? Because yes, the E word. At the same time, though, like my encouragement, and I'm guilty of this sometimes too with my team, we need to check our hearts. Are we being empathetic to really meet people where they are in their suffering and struggling at home with work or whatever else is on their plate, and truly trying to see how they're doing with their mental health and their capacity and meet them and try and remove some roadblocks? Or are we just throwing that word out to sound nice? And so this is maybe a challenge and a charge for the leaders listening, that let's just not throw out words that sound good because they're trending and buzzy, but really embody what they mean and truly selflessly leading others. And so you can tell I'm a little bit passionate about this one because I see it all the time. And it's great if we're truly embodying it instead of just selfishly throwing the word around so that we make ourselves feel good.
I dig it, man. I dig it. People virtue signaling the empathy. I'm like, I'm a sociopath. I have no feelings. Not true, but I go the other way on that. But I'm with you, man. It's something I like to say, don't talk about it, be about it. And that's what I hear you saying. Yeah, you could throw that word around, but really, what's the meaning? How are you, as you said so beautifully, how do you embody that? So let's move on to what everybody is here for. We interrupt your regularly scheduled program for a public service announcement. We're going to get right back into the show, but I wanted to ask you a question. If you have been listening to the show for any amount of time and you've picked up even one single tip, then I need your help. Get the word out. Tell people about resultsleader.fm. Share it on social media, share it on your email, share it anywhere. Hashtag ResultsLeaderFM. Now let's jump back into the interview. Everybody wants to know, including me, Jack, why do results matter?
I think purpose and meaning, and not necessarily, I don't think of results as the OKRs, the quarterly metrics, our annual rev goals or hiring standards. And yes, checking some boxes. For me, results bring purpose and meaning to the work we do, whatever that space is that you're in. And most importantly to me, when I think of results, it's results in relationships, or really how I work towards results is through relationships. And when I start to see or experience with maybe somebody on my own team or with a client, because we've been making some progress on an area in their life that they've been struggling with as a leader, and our relationship is growing deeper, not just that horizontal, oh yeah, we know more about each other, but I'm talking the vertical depth of relationships. And that to me is, when we think on the X and Y axis of results, like, to me, it's over time, not just a hockey stick up as many people focus on, especially in corporate settings. But for me, is there a downward trend in our heart connection with people? And that may sound mushy to some of our super business oriented listeners, but at the end of the day, if we're just blowing through and checking some boxes on quarterly rev, but our people are left bloody and hurting in the background, then really what's the purpose and meaning behind what we're working towards? So for me, results are important. They're important though, because at the end of the day, it's for the sake of the relationships and in service of others.
In the last 5 years, what new realization has helped you get better results for your clients?
The power of wisdom, and wisdom not maybe necessarily in just a book knowledge view, but wisdom that comes from past experience, but also wisdom that is instantaneous or unexpected in the moment. And so, for example, when I'm meeting with somebody in an executive coaching situation, they bring a tough question of what they're working through as a leader, and I'm trying to draw on my experience as a certified coach in my institutional work, as well as my books and as well as past experiences. And if nothing's coming up, it's really just allowing to be in the moment. And so what comes up when we're present and focused and going back to that heart connection, the wisdom that can come about in that, to me, is oftentimes the most beautiful moments in coaching relationships, and especially when we're trying to see results with our clients. And so over the last few years, I've grown in stronger belief of allowing to be what will come. And that's not to just sound like some Confucius, fortune cookie knowledge drop. That is really, from me, blowing it a lot of times, as far as thinking I need to come with the most perfectly articulated coaching guidance tip, when really just allowing some silence into a conversation or a coaching relationship. And then from there, the wisdom that can kind of blossom, but it takes a lot of watering with compassion, with some of the basics of forming a relationship. So over the last 5 years, the wisdom that can come from just being with somebody and not trying to force too much.
It's so funny how that, and then if we think back earlier to the part where you talked about surrender, how those two fit together, that's very, very interesting and profound. So what area of your business would you like better results?
I think in automated marketing, if we're on a results-based podcast and I'm talking business stuff, I've been doing a lot of work with the team to set up some more automated approaches for our online course around storytelling. And there's just a plethora of ways of going about that these days, vying for people's attention. And more for me, it's the learnings that come from it. I'm a bit of a data geek, and when we can see what's working, what's not, I would love to just see the different options that are out there for meeting people and providing real value to them, not just trying to put a Facebook ad in their face and hope that they give some money, because that's frankly not what I'm in it for. But if I can learn a little bit more, and to your question, see more results in how to reach people in such a fragmented space when people are already distracted enough. And I don't want to be the one responsible for putting more screen time in someone's face. But if I can, through what I believe are some services of value to really improve people's lives and help them grow, then what's the best way to make that journey happen? And so I'm open always, and the team is constantly working on how we go about that.
What results are you most proud of?
I got to give a shout out to our intern, because he just wrapped up yesterday and gave a beautiful recap to his internship with us before he moves on to Oracle with his next internship, and just kicked it off with so much gratitude in his opening remarks of his recap presentation that really, I was almost starting to tear up in him sharing his experience. And again, going back to the relationship side of things, being able to recognize young talent who are on the move, navigating this difficult space that we're in these days of their careers. And so one of the most proud results, again, is going back to people and for the sake of relationships, seeing others grow and doing whatever I can to stay out of the way of it. But if I can also help them, empower them, enable them through some wisdom, then so be it. But at the end of the day, that was a highlight of me for sure in the recent past was our internship.
Any parting thoughts you'd like to share with the results leaders who are listening to us right now?
A tendency right now is for me to want to try and drop some cool sounding wisdom bomb that gets thrown on a quote page, but I'm sorry for anyone listening. I don't have that for you. All I do have for you is self-awareness, because we can run around our days, check our boxes, kill it some quarter, but how are we doing that from a leadership standpoint of serving others? And so my question, instead of some knowledge I'd impart people at the end here, is a question of in service of what? For the sake of what? So when brushing our teeth, looking at our calendar for the day, at the end of the day, none of that's going to matter when we're on our deathbed. So what is it that you're going to want to look back on? And I guess the last note I would say is, how do you feel if somebody was writing your eulogy tomorrow?
Powerful. So I know our listeners are going to want more from you. Where can they go?
I'd love to say email me personally, which we can try, jack@liveventures.com. More likely success, my admin is, so that's at connect@liveventures.com. But I'm also not heavily on the social, but LinkedIn I think is a great way to connect these days. Or if you just want a little bit of learning and you don't want to have to deal with talking to me much, just check us out, lightatVentures.com.
Now you have a podcast too, don't you?
We do, Story Living, and we experimented with it. First season came out, just blessed by the variety of leaders who came on, shared their wisdom, and we're now ramping up for our next season here. So Story Living, all about learning from inspiring leaders and their stories.
Beautiful. All right, so we have been talking with Jack Griffin here. Thank you, Jack, for spending some time with us. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in. And another results leader is in the can. That is a wrap for another edition of ResultsLeader.fm. If you are out there getting results for your clients and you want to be featured on the show, go to ResultsLeader.fm now and apply to be on the show. And if you love what you're hearing, share the show, give us a rating and review, do anything to help us get the message out there. Thought leadership is easy, but results leadership is hard. We'll catch you on the next one.
This is the podcastfactory.com.